Ken, it's Ken Kraetzer for Sons of the American Legion Radio and our coverage of college basketball, and have a chance to talk with a good friend of ours. That is Rich Ensor, who is commissioner of the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference. Rich, how are you today?
Doing well, Ken, under trying circumstances that we're all under.
Yeah, absolutely. And we always give a shout out to all the healthcare workers, especially in our area, certainly in New Jersey, just doing a phenomenal job. Doctors, nurses, technicians at hospitals, and all the support people, police, fire, and also the military that have been in the region to help out. What an example of courage and hard work that they're demonstrating.
Yeah, I have a wife who's a school nurse, and she's still on the phone with students and their parents every day. And I just came from Atlantic City this morning, where they set up the convention center as a remote, alternate hospital site. So yeah, we have to really give thanks to all those folks for all their hard work.
Absolutely. And Rich Ensor, last time I saw you was down at your tournament in Atlantic City. I caught one of the opening night games, one of the Iona games in the tournament. And then, unfortunately, you had to cancel the tournament on the Thursday of the event. What was that like for you? And it must have been a very tough decision.
Well, it was a tough decision, although when it was all said and done, it was a pretty obvious decision as well. It was a pressure cooker, really, because we were starting the championship at a new site for the first time ever, and so you have all the things that go along with any time you go into a building for the first time, and coordinating hotels and team arrivals and you name it. It's such a multifaceted operation. So we have all that going on, and I have a relatively new staff because of some turnover we had last year, so they were learning their roles. In the meantime, we have the COVID-19 situation developing daily as a bigger and bigger concern, and we were monitoring that. I was talking with the other commissioners at their championship sites. One of our presidents, Father Marr at Niagara, is on the NCAA Board of Governors, so he was keeping me abreast of their discussions. I had a multiple series of conference calls with the MAAC presidents and the MAAC executive committee of the board. And we had the ADs and SWAs there at Atlantic City, so we were meeting with them as well on a regular basis. So didn't get to watch a lot of basketball, Ken, unfortunately, because the tournament ended early, and then the opening games, I was rather busy. I saw a little bit. I did enjoy the Iona St. Peter's game. Was a tremendous game. The Manhattan game was against Niagara. That was another tremendous game. I thought the facility was working really well, but it was a little surreal that the parallel things that were going on, trying to run the tournament for the first time, as well as deal with the COVID-19 situation.
Certainly. Well, I'm sure everyone was disappointed that you didn't get a chance to have a big Friday and Saturday night when you've had the semifinals and finals. So I know you're already working for next year.
Yeah, what'd you think of it? Yeah, as someone who's been to a number of these over the years.
Well, I've been to Atlantic City fairly often. I go to the Atlantic City Air Show every summer, and my family likes to go down there. It was interesting to be in the building. It's a very historic building. I got a chance to walk around the lobby. There's a lot of artwork in the lobby. That if you take the time to notice, you see how much attention was paid to it. And you folks had it well organized, and we had watched. I was there on the Tuesday night and watched the Iona game there, and I thought it was a good facility. I stayed in a hotel right down the street at Caesars, and that was a nice place to stay. So it was a good day. I wish I could have stayed longer, but I know you're working on next year. I guess one of the things that did go well was the online competition that you had. You've been a big promoter of esports, and that was one competition you were able to take to completion.
Yeah, but we did move it off-site once the facility was no longer available to us in Atlantic City. And we've wrapped up, I think, three of the different games, and we have the fourth one underway. It's been good. I think it's kept our students involved on those campuses. It's given people something to talk about and watch if they're interested in esports. It's getting a lot of attention nationwide and the growth of esports and the college part of that as well. So yeah, I thought it went well. And as you know, my son Kieran coordinates that for us. He was at Canisius this past year running their program as well. And he put a lot of effort into Atlantic City and including hiring a production company for the broadcast and what they call the casters, which we would call broadcasters. They call casters. They have their own nomenclature. But they all that and then switch gears pretty quickly in a period of about 10 days and organize the online competition. So we're pleased it went well. Marist has won 2 of the games, and I believe Siena won the 3rd, and the 4th one's still up for grabs. So I follow it a little bit. Rocket League is the easiest one for me to follow because it's kind of like soccer with very souped up cars on a soccer field. So it's kind of relatively easy for me to follow. We haven't done any of the traditional sport games like NBA 2K yet. When they get into League of Legends and Overwatch and all this, they start losing me. I kind of know what they're doing out there, but I don't know what it all means. But for that demographic, I think it's really important that the MAAC is now engaging them. I think it's important for our campuses to engage them, and I think it's a recruitment tool for students in general. And I think ultimately, Atlantic City could become a very good site for the championship because it would allow us to mingle as different groups in one building while basketball and esports are all going on. And I think it has great potential, but we got a little sidetracked this year, obviously, with the COVID-19
Yeah, you couldn't run things the way you wanted to and had to cancel abruptly. Now, I have to admit, I got home that weekend, and within an hour, I got 2 pieces of stunning news that the Archdiocese of New York was calling off Mass across the Archdiocese for the Sunday, and that Rick Pitino would be coming to Iona to be a head coach. I have to admit, as an Iona alumnus, I was a bit stunned at it. But certainly the national press has really given the story a lot of attention. What was your reaction to the news from Iona?
Well, I was going to say the church. The last time I looked, they were still sending me the collection envelope. So we've been mailing ours in, but you're right. That was a bit of news as well. As far as Rick Pitino, I haven't had a chance really to talk to him yet. I know he's on board and working hard. He's a Hall of Fame coach. Anytime we can get somebody of that caliber to come into the MAAC and run our program, it's a great accomplishment for the school. I'll be interested to see how he adjusts to the mid-majors. It's a different world, as you know, or maybe the mid-majors will adjust to Coach Pitino. We'll have to see. It's been a long time since he's coached at this level. I guess Providence, maybe. I don't know. Where was he an assistant? He never really did a period.
Well, he was at Boston University, and then he was at Providence for 2 years, which I'm an alumnus of. And he took, in the second year there, he took Providence to the Final Four.
That's right.
Against Syracuse.
Yeah. And they weren't really, at that point, they weren't really a mid-major anymore either. So I guess the BU would be the last time he had any real experience at our level. So it's changed a lot over time, as you know. So it'll be an interesting year. He certainly has a lot of ambitions. I've seen what he's been doing in the recruiting space. And then there's a lot of talk about the schedule being upped to another level. So let's keep our fingers crossed and hope it works well.
Yeah. Hey, when we mention Iona, we always give a shout out to Coach Tim Clues, who stepped down due to his medical leave this year. I exchanged notes with him this week. He seems pretty upbeat, but we always want to encourage, say a prayer for Tim Clues that he can beat this illness that he's been challenged with.
Yeah, I don't know, as you know, I don't know much about the illness, but obviously it's serious enough to take him out of the game for a while. I hope there comes a time when he can get back in the game. We have exchanged communications any number of times, and I've told him when he's ready, we'll find a place for him to help us out here. We can always use the expertise of of a former coach. We've had any number of them here over the years work for us. If you remember, Dave McGarity did some time here between his years at Marist and the year when he moved over with the West Point women. And we had John Leonard was here for a time, and even Larry Keating, who was a coach way back in the day, spent some years here. So anytime we can bring somebody in with that kind of point of view, it's helpful. And so I hope I can get Tim involved here at some point in the future once he gets back on his feet.
Absolutely. And just thinking about the basketball season you had, the Met basketball writers just announced their teams. One standout on the first team on the men's side was E.J. Crawford from Iona. What a consistent 4-year player he was for Iona. They could always count on him for 17, 20 points a game, and always towards the end of the game when they really needed and they were making a push. And we were very pleased to see E.J. Crawford get that recognition.
He was a great player, and he has the rings to prove it, as does the Iona team for 4+ years. They've always been in the mix for a long time. But really the standard bearer, and one of the standard bearers in our league, has been Iona from the get-go. Manhattan's had good runs at times, and obviously Sandon has had a few good years when Franny was there. But Iona's been always one of our top programs, and one of the founding members of the MAAC. And I don't know, Ken, if you've been keeping track, but this upcoming year is our 40th anniversary. So I think back to Jim McDermott, who you knew.
I knew Jim McDermott, yeah, 40 years. Yeah. I remember before.
Yeah, Jim was, I knew Jim more as a coach when I was a student, and then not a coach. He was an AD at that point, and Jim Valvano was coach at that point. But, and then he came and formed the MAAC with the original 6 schools, including Army. So, yeah, it'll be our 40th season. Time flies.
Yeah, I was just reading John Feinstein's book where he kind of focused on the mid-majors over the last 2 years, and really likes the style of basketball and the role of student athletes at mid-majors. Spent some time with Iona, spent some time with Army, and always enjoy. I see John Feinstein at some of the Army football games, and really appreciated getting a chance to know him. And an interesting book he wrote just came out on the 2018-2019 season, covering a lot.
Well, he's a great writer. I've always enjoyed his books, some of his golf and other ones as well. He does have a little background in the ACC, though, but I think, and when it comes to sports writers, he and especially of the literary type, he's on the top of the list these days with a few others, very few others.
He's terrific, great guy to know. Talking with Commissioner Rich Ensor of the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference, and obviously the cancellation of the NCAA tournament was terrible for the players, tremendous disappointment for players, schools that were expecting to compete in it, but also a financial loss. How does that affect your conference, that the revenue share from the NCAA tournament will be down this year?
Well, the NCAA revenue share, at least as it relates to MAAC, is not a huge hit. We were slated to get the 6 primary units that every conference gets from the distribution, and we're still getting that, although it's been delayed now to June for distribution. So that's about 1.6 million. So that's coming in, and that's for this year's operating budget. So if that hadn't occurred, we would be scrambling a bit now. We took some hits on the distributions to the schools. There's about 4 or 5 different funds that are come out of the basketball revenue. Student Athlete Fund, the Student Athlete Opportunity Fund. There's a block grant that goes to the conferences for officiating, and a couple of others that are based on sports sponsorship and scholarship funding. And those are down significantly. I think they're down about 60%. So the schools have taken various amounts of hits based on that change. And On the MAAC level, the other major hits we had were we won't get our revenue guarantee from the tournament. We had a force majeure clause in our contract, which is fair. You know, if you can't complete the tournament, the arena doesn't have to pay the guarantee. It's a fair thing. So, you know, it's about a $300,000 hit. And the sponsorship sales will be down about 60% because of so much of it's tied into the tournament and the fact that we didn't get to those later games where really the audience is at its highest and the attendance in the arena is at its highest, is going to hurt that. So, no, we'll take some hits. We have reserves in the MAAC that are relatively healthy. We've built them up over the last 30 years so that we could have, you know, about a year's worth of operating funds in there if we needed them. It also provides our cash flow for operations. So this year, even though we're not getting the NCAA check till June, and our fiscal year started last July, I have enough funds in there to get through to June because of the cash reserves. So that was strategic, something we long ago planned for, and it's coming in handy now. Not all conferences are in the same position. I know some of the mid-majors are struggling a little bit. And we're putting in for the PPP, and we've completed our application and are eligible, and we're waiting to see if Congress does the second allocation, which it looks like it will, and then we should get a piece of change from that to help keep the staff on board at least through June 30th. And then we'll have to see what the fall starts to look like. But we're not out of the woods by any means, but relatively speaking, the MAAC as a conference operation, I'm not talking about the schools, is in pretty decent shape for this year.
Well, certainly the sports entertainment segment has been devastated by the COVID-19 crisis, close downs, similar to airlines and a lot of the entertainment industry. But it sounds like you've really managed it well so that you had reserves to handle an unexpected, really bad year. When we starting to hear about plans for the fall, certainly the schools, it's a big issue. They're on online education right now for their students. They're concerned about what the enrollment's going to be from admissions this year and next year. What do you hear from these schools as far as how they've adapted to online education and how they see their admissions helping them for the fall?
Well, as far as online education, most of the schools, and this was something I wasn't even that aware of, had fairly robust online systems in place already. To some extent, a lot of classwork now gets done online. And so, at least from what I've heard, the transition to only online has gone well. I don't have a lot of particular data in terms of if the class credits and everything are the same. I assume they are because the students were already in the classes. So I think for the spring, their semester that'll be ending up soon, they were relatively okay. Most of the schools had to do refunds on room and board, percentage-wise, based on the students going home. In terms of the enrollment picture for this year, it's still very much up in the air, Ken. The MAAC schools, just like most of higher education, are waiting to see how long this COVID-19 situation is going to remain as it is right now with the shutdown. Assuming that we can come out of the shutdown by September, then I think schools will try to get back up and running as soon as they can. Part of that's going to be relying on the amount of testing that's available so they can do some identification on who has immunity, who doesn't have immunity, who's had the virus. So I think that's going to be a case for any entity that has a lot of presence in one site, whether it's a big office complex or a factory. You need to know that the vast majority of your employees or students or faculty are not going to spread the virus to others. So, and frankly, it's all up in the air. I think you'll start hearing stories around June 1 on what enrollment's looking like for the fall, how many students have committed to come to whatever schools they're choosing. that system's way out of whack right now because, typically by May, that by May 1. So it's delayed at least a month or so
Sure.
as students are dealing with the fact that their parents might be unemployed now. We had 25 million new unemployed last month. That's going to impact the ability of a lot of people to send kids off to college or the college of their choice. It's going to impact the amount of financial aid that schools may have to give out in order to maintain a class size that meets their economic model. So a lot of questions. I do not envy the jobs that college presidents have right now. It's very difficult. They're managing staff and students and enrollment and serious days for higher education as well as the country as a whole. Sports isn't immune from that. So we're really waiting to see if the schools are starting up in September. We don't even know at this point what the summer environment's going to be like. Excuse me. Typically, this time of the year, the coaches are getting ready to go out recruiting. They're doing conditioning in the off season. Basketball often has students come back on campus for classes, and then they are allowed to do conditioning with the athletes. So that's all up in the air still. We haven't got a determination yet. I think we'll get some indications relatively soon from the NCAA if they're going to allow for recruitment as normal this summer. I'm a guessing man on this, but I would say I think it's going to be severely impacted at best, and it may not happen at all. I'm not sure we're going to be able to run the types of events that typically take place in the summer with all the promoters and the AAU and even the NCAA's own basketball camps. I think it's problematic whether parents are going to let their children go off to these camps to be evaluated given the current situation. So a lot of question marks, and we're looking for some answers from the NCAA relatively soon. The commissioners are meeting once a week as a group, and in subgroups we're also meeting weekly. We're interacting with the NCAA staff twice a week on the senior level, including Mark Emmert and Kevin Lennon and Danny Gavitt and all the people that run both the governance side and the basketball side. So it's not for lack of discussion, believe me, but we just don't have a lot of clarity yet. It's coming, but it's not as quick as any of us would like. It's just we don't have all the key factors identified in decision making by the government agencies to know whether or not we're going to be able to reconvene operations as they normally take place during the summer. And that was also going on in March with the tournaments. Part of the reason why the tournaments went as long as they did was, frankly, the governments, the state of New Jersey and the state of New York, had not shut down public events like basketball tournaments. So I was talking with Val Ackerman and Bernie McLeod and myself. We're talking every night about what they were doing in the Atlantic 10 of the Big East and what I was doing in the MAAC. And as long as New Jersey was saying you could convene and run these events, and we were in an arena that's run by a state agency, then we were running the events. So it's only when the government got to the point where they were shutting down and the NCAA was pulling the plug on the NCAA championship that we were able to make our decision.
Certainly a very difficult time. At the moment, you had to shut down an event that valued by the schools and the players, and been planned for so long. And now the impact on higher education, very uncertain times. I was on the phone with the football coach at West Point, Jeff Munkin, a couple of weeks ago, and we talked a little bit about what it takes to start a football season. They would need to start the 1st of August to start their schedule on time. You're not a football league, but you have plenty of fall sports. Is there a day you kind of need to know what you're going to be able to do to run fall sports?
One thing about Army, I guess, at least those athletes are involved on conditioning all year round, I take it. So yeah. It's a little different. But, I think we need to know by the middle of July or August 1 at the latest whether or not we're running fall sports. I mean, from a conference perspective, the schedules are all done. The championship sites are determined. We have officials. It's just whether or not our campuses are going to be open. So a lot of my decision making will be queued up by when the schools determine what they're doing for September 1. The summer environment now, typically you'll have soccer, volleyball, all back on campus around August 1 or thereabouts. So we need to know by July whether that's happening. But the actual games themselves, we probably could go even a little later and still have no impact. We'll just start getting impacted when and if the schools say, well, you can't come on campus till the students come on campus, and they're coming on at Labor Day. So now our athletes in the fall have not had conditioning periods. So we would have to set up a period of time for conditioning and probably a couple of weeks of non-conference play and then do our conference play. So we can adjust things based on when the athletes are allowed back on campus. And we have contingency plans already drafted for startups as late as October. And for the fall, and then even for basketball, we could start up at Thanksgiving if we had to, or Christmas.
Yeah.
When we get the tournaments in, the conference games in January and February, and qualify for the NCAAs, we can adjust basketball as needed, as well as the fall sports. And the NCAA is in the process of putting together waivers, working with the commissioners on all these elements. You know, there's typically regs as far as sports sponsorships and how many games you have to play and all that kind of thing. Those will be waived as we get into this fall and winter environment, depending on decisions that are made about reopening campuses.
And one of the comments I heard from the NCAA leadership is that their position is that sports wouldn't start until the campuses opened up. And
well, there is that thought, but and I personally agree with that, but that doesn't mean you couldn't do it. I think it's highly unlikely it would happen. But I know there's disagreement even amongst the FBS group in football. A couple of commissioners have been fairly outspoken that you can't have football unless there's students on campus. But I've heard the other opinion also offered. So football is such an economic driver for those major programs. It's not something the MAAC's too worried about, but those schools really need those funds to operate their full athletic programs. Forget about football. And then, our focus is we have to have an NCAA championship this year in basketball, because without that, I don't think the NCAA would be able to do that minimum distribution again for next year. So it's really important that we have the Final Four this year. So that'll be the thing I'm most focused on. But certainly in the short term, football is going to dominate the conversation.
Well, Rich Ensor, commissioner of the Metro Atlantic Conference, good friend of ours, and really, you deserve a lot of congratulations for what you've done for college sports with the MAAC and with women's sports, and bringing a number of tournaments and NCAA competitions to upstate New York, to Albany, to Buffalo for hockey and basketball. And you've really done a lot for the area, and now bringing the tournament to Atlantic City. You've really done a lot in your career to help build college sports, but also to help spread the economic opportunity to the New York State, New Jersey, and Connecticut regions.
Well, thanks. We were disappointed. Obviously, we couldn't host the first and second rounds in Albany this year for men's basketball. We had put in 18 months of work on that project too. That was a real disappointment. I hope that they'll re-award it to the Albany Times Union Center sometime in the next cycle, which is, I think, about 24 or so, 2024. In the meantime, we do have the NCAA Women's Basketball Regional coming up this year in Albany again, so we'll start focusing on that. But yeah, we do enjoy working with the NCAA. The NCAA brings in a lot of big events to our region, and we'd like to bring them into the cities that help support MAAC basketball and MAAC sports in general. So the fact that Buffalo and Albany have been able to host these events and host them regularly is good for those arenas, which is good for the MAAC because we benefit from that as partners with them and any other number of projects And same thing with the MTEs, the multi-team events that we sponsor with ESPN at Disney in Thanksgiving, and with Basketball Hall of Fame at the Mohegan Sun, and some of the events we're doing overseas. We think that just grows the MAAC brand, but also provides our teams opportunities to play at a fairly high level, knowing that the MAAC is involved with it and will take care of their needs as well as the majors. So it's been something I've always been committed to, and while we're going to take a hit on some of that for the next couple of years as we readjust to the environment after this pandemic settles down, we look forward to re-engaging with that and getting it going at a high level again as soon as possible.
Well, Rich Ensor, thank you so much for your time today to discuss the end of the college sports season. Unfortunately, with the conference tournaments canceled, your event canceled in Atlantic City, and thoughts on moving forward. It's going to be a difficult time, but hopefully, the medical people have done such a wonderful job trying to contain this COVID crisis, and hopefully business and American society and college sports and college campuses can get back to normal very soon.
Well, thanks, Ken. I appreciate that, and I hope all your viewers are taking care of themselves and stay healthy. We've had a few hits in the athletic community, as you know, and one Iona former player.
Jonathan Duck.
Yeah, one of the former Siena players passed away recently.
Oh.
MAAC has taken its hits on that level as well, but we pray everybody does well and that we come out of this stronger. And college sports will always be an important part of our nation's sense of identity, and I know we'll get it going again as soon as possible.
Okay, Rich Ensor, thank you again for your time. It's always great to chat, hear your perspective, and work with you over the years. And we'll catch up again very soon. This is Ken Kraetzer. Thank you, Rich. And thank you. And this is Ken Kraetzer for Sons of the American Legion Radio, representing Squadron 135 in White Plains, New York, and the 350,000 members of the Sons of the American Legion across the country, and the 2 million veterans who are members of the American Legion. So, Rich Ensor, thank you again. This is Ken Kraetzer for Sons of the American Legion Radio from White Plains, New York. Have a good day, everybody, and stay well.